How you doing, everybody? And welcome to another episode of the John Riley Project. This is a podcast all about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're broadcasting from Poway, California, the city in the country here out in the San Diego suburbs. And boy, how you doing? Man, I'll tell you, there's been so much going on in the world of current events and news. And I get prepared to talk about a few things. And then the next thing you know, we're switching from protesters to assassinations, and now we're on the cusp of World War III. There's a lot of stuff going down. We're going to comment on a lot of that in this episode. So how you doing, everybody? Still doing this recording thing. I'm going to try to do recordings of these podcasts about, weekly, and try to get more into that rhythm. And then I'm going to start going with the live stream at a pre-scheduled time where you can join me. But, thanks for coming on board. Thanks for being a part of the John Riley Project. Okay, let's start off here. I want to talk about all the stuff that went on in LA, okay? And this was the ICE, the ICE protests in Los Angeles, which turned into, just a disaster in terms of the way it was handled, the way it was planned. Like, it's great that you see those protesters out there, arguing for the freedom for immigrants to be able to travel in America. They're fighting against the deportation, where some of these guys are getting rounded up at work sites or, going to court, to get their immigration paperwork organized, and ICE is there to raid them. It's funny how they call them freeloaders, but a lot of times they're rounding them up at job sites, which is insane. So I'm right there. My heart is in the right place there with the protesters. But the reaction to all of this has got so blown out of proportion, so many distortions and lies. Going from the protesters going beyond what they really should have been doing. They were causing destruction, lighting Waymo cars on fire. There was conflicts with the police. There were people that were trying to block traffic on the freeway and on the roads. And we're going to talk specifically about that. But at the same time, you had Trump that was escalating the thing, sending out the National Guard, sending out the Marines. Oh, my God, you're sending out, our military who are trained to kill, and you're sending them in to do crowd control. And this was all happening just like in downtown L.A. in a kind of a tiny little spot in L.A., but it was covered wall to wall by the international media. And of course, Trump blows it up, says, oh, yeah, L.A.'s on fire. And, Newsom and what's the mayor's name in LA? Bass, they're incompetent. And, it just turned into a fiasco. But I do want to talk about one specific thing. And I think this is an important thing. And it's an angle we don't talk about enough when it comes to these protests. Now, I think one of the things that makes America great is that we have a First Amendment where people can have the right of assembly. They can go out there and protest, where if you did this in other foreign countries, you would be arrested. You would be sent to the gulag. You would be sent to Siberia, or to a prisoner of war camp or something in some of these other countries. Stalag 13 is what I was trying to think of. But in America, we can protest, and we have the freedom to do that as long as we're not harming other people, right? And this is where it gets out of line. Maybe you've seen some of the video footage of people blocking the streets, blocking the freeways. Okay, and I'm specifically talking about cases where protesters are blocking regular people's ability to drive their car on the street. People that are, somewhat, let's just say, neutral on the issue. They just need to go to work. They just need to go pick up their kid at school. They just need to go visit their mom or dad. They got an errand to run. These are people that aren't in the protests. They're not for the illegal immigrants. They're not on Trump's side either. They just need to get somewhere. And yet these people are blocking their cars. And it's interesting because the reaction from my left-wing friends and right-wing friends is so different. My left-wing friends would say, oh, it's just an inconvenience. I mean, it's no big deal. Just deal with it. It's not that big of a problem. I think, well, no way, man. This is a legit problem that you're impeding the right of other people to freely travel. Now, my right-wing friends are saying, yeah, well, hell yeah, man, we should just be able to run them over, and they just want to, escalate the violence. And I'm thinking neither one of these sides is thinking rationally about this. It does seem weird though, doesn't it? I mean, you have anti-ICE protesters who, like I said, my heart and their heart are aligned, but some people don't have the right philosophical framework. So there are people there are out there fighting for the rights of illegal immigrants not to be rounded up by ICE. In other words, fighting for the right of individuals to live freely, to travel freely, to be able to work freely. And yet, these anti-ICE protesters were blocking the freedom of regular people from being able to travel freely. And I just think that is just outright hypocrisy. This is the thing that we lose sight of, is that, we go out there, we're fighting for rights. We're fighting for the rights of women. We're fighting for the rights of illegal aliens. We're fighting for the rights of whomever group you want to focus on. But it's important to understand that everybody else has those same rights. So while we're fighting for liberty and freedom for illegal immigrants, let's say, we should be fighting for the same freedom and liberty and pursuit of happiness for all people in America. So blocking a street, blocking cars is wrong. It's immoral. It undermines your cause. It pisses people off. And it's just self-defeating. It's just really dumb. What we need to have is law enforcement. This is where law enforcement needs to play a role, is they need to control the crowd. If they're going to be at a public park or at the steps of the city hall, which is generally a public area, then fine. If they want to block the roads and, they got permission to do that, for a parade or something, okay, then that's separate. But you just can't show up and block the roads. And what's interesting is that Ayn Rand, who I'm a fan of, I'm kind of like a student of a lot of her work. And in so many ways, the problems of this world could be solved if we just implemented some of her ideas. And Ayn Rand spoke specifically on this. I want to share this with you because I think it's good and it is aligned with what I'm saying. According to Ayn Rand, civil disobedience may be justifiable in some cases when and if an individual disobeys a law in order to bring an issue to court as a test case. Such an action involves respect for legality and a protest directed only at a particular law which the individual seeks an opportunity to prove it to be unjust. The same is true of the individuals when and if the risks involved are their own. But there is no justification in a civilized society for the kind of mass civil disobedience that involves the violation of the rights of others. Regardless of whether the demonstrator's goal is good or evil, the end does not justify the means. No one's rights can be secured by the violation of the rights of others. Mass disobedience is an assault on the concept of rights. It's a mob's defiance of the legality of such. So she's putting it in a lot more, should I say, philosophical language, but it's the same idea. We all have equal rights. We all have equal rights to our own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. American citizens have that right. Immigrants have that right. Illegal immigrants, they all have a right to their own life and to make choices in their own life. This is in my opinion, we just need to make our legal immigration easier, faster, less expensive. So all of these undocumented immigrants are documented. And then we can do business in America, all above board, above the table. They'll pay taxes. And we don't have this sort of underground economy of people that aren't really here legally. They're hiding in the shadows and now fearful of being grabbed by an ICE agent, thrown into the back of a train car and shipped out to a prison in, El Salvador. I mean, so we're seeing that now and it's just wrong. So I think this is critical that we understand that we all have the same rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I do want to bring up a gentleman who I think is a terrific guy, and his name is Connor Boyack. Now, if you know me, I live here in Poway, the city and the country. Connor Boyack's mom, Marilee Boyack, used to serve on the Poway City Council. And since then, the family has all moved over back to Utah. Marilee Boyack, Connor's mom, actually was the person that appointed me to the Poway Budget Review Committee. So it's good family. But Connor has created an incredible organization called Libertas that lobbies for individual rights and freedom in the state of Utah. His movement is expanding. He's also written books about the Tuttle twins and American history and teaching these ideas of independence, of freedom, of individual rights, of free market economics to children and to teens, and providing it in, a format that makes it easy for them to understand. But Connor Boyack had a great quote, and I just want to read it to you. This is a tweet or an X post, and he said, "The most revolutionary act in today's world isn't protesting in the streets. It's raising critical thinking kids who question political authority, who are skeptical of the media, and who operate independently and self-sufficiently." And I love that. I mean, I really did, because that just makes so much sense to me. I mean, it really does, because I was considering going, to some of these protests, but I thought, how much of a difference am I going to make there versus what I'm already doing here in my podcast, talking to you? So, I have my own platform to share this. And I think this will be a lot more effective if I wasn't just another body in the street. I think there's a lot of ways that we can influence change. So good on you, Connor. Critical thinking independently. Don't fall into the Republican, the MAGA, the Democrat line of thinking, because so many people are kind of auto-programmed to do that. Think for yourself. All right, let's move on. This story about the Trump phones caught my attention, and this is unbelievable. I mean, you got to be kidding me. So the deal is that Trump is going to start up his own phone company that's going to be competitive with the Apple iPhone and with the Samsung Galaxy phones and, all the smartphones that are out there. And at first I heard he was going to make them in America. I've also heard that he's going to do it for $499 each. Other people are saying, no, he's going to have to make it in China or somewhere in Asia. And this makes him look like a hypocrite, because he's always, angry at all the imports that are coming from China, and that China's ripping us off and all this other baloney that he keeps sharing. But isn't it weird that the guy that is the president of the United States, who is using tariffs as kind of like a brute force object to get companies in other countries and get leaders in other countries to conform to the way he wants to do business, and he's penalizing Tim Cook and Apple for when they import their phones, they're going to have to pay a tariff. By the way, Tim Cook donated to Trump's inauguration, hoping to, be in good favor with him. And then sure enough, he throws Tim Cook under the bus, screws him over. Trump's a con man. And now Apple is going to have to bear the burden of these tariffs on their products coming into America, which they're going to pass on down to the consumer, just like all tariffs are. And that's going to make their prices more expensive. And now here comes Trump coming in, offering a less expensive solution. So he's rigging the market while he's also playing the game. He's like a referee and a quarterback in one. He's setting the rules, changing the rules to give himself an advantage that other people are unable to pull that off. So what is this Trump phone thing going to be? Is it going to be Trump University? Is it going to be Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump Airlines? In the end, this is typical, because he's finding a way that he can personally profit, which goes to my point. I don't really think that he is passionately and personally caring about a lot of the things that he gets on the bully pulpit and talks about. To him, these issues are ways to manipulate the media, manipulate voters, manipulate modern culture to keep him in power and to get his base to rally up behind him, so that it's hard for him to be ejected as president. And while he's president, he's able to enrich his family by making these kinds of deals. The guy has no principles. None at all. And that's his unpredictability is I think one of the things that makes him really a very immoral character. That he has no philosophy, no consistency to the way he thinks, other than what's going to make Trump great. But we're seeing more now. I mean, we talk about con man activities. How about this? I'm going to end the war in Ukraine and Russia on day one. I mean, how many times did Trump promise that? on the campaign trail. Well, just as a general rule, whenever you hear of a politician making any sort of a day one proclamation, and they all do it, Republicans and Democrats, Kamala Harris was saying on day one, I'm going to do this. I mean, on day one means when I'm a dictator, I can decide, and that's not how America's supposed to work. America's supposed to work where legislation goes to Congress. It's just like Schoolhouse Rock, right? So legislation goes to Congress. It's discussed, it's debated, it's amended, it's approved by the House and approved by the Senate, and then the president signs the bill. So what's going on here? I mean, in many ways, I think that, when he says, I'm going to do this on day one, this is Trump wanting to be a dictator. He even joked about it. Well, I won't be a dictator. Well, maybe on day one. So again, it's just manipulation, con game actions right here. So whenever you hear like some politicians say, I mean, this is just a across the board rule. Whenever they say on day one, yada, 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 I mean, that should just set off BS alarms in your head that it's a bunch of baloney. And the crazy thing is, he said he was going to end the war in Ukraine with Russia. He said he was going to end the war and negotiate peace with Israel and Gaza. And they were going to turn that whole Gaza into United States land, make it a Mediterranean beach resort and put Trump hotels on it. We don't hear about that anymore. But the point is that he promised to get out of the wars. And there were two when main wars when he was inaugurated. Well, now we have three with the Iran-Israel conflict and possibly America getting involved with that mess. I mean, what do you think about all this? In the end, Trump just wants power, less democracy, less checks on his authority. I mean, it's just unbelievable. One moment. Okay. My dog Sniffer needed to get out of the podcast studio, so I'm going to let him go so he's not barking in the background. Okay, this is a little bit wonky, and this is something that I follow. I don't know how much you follow this, but to me, this is an interesting story. And this is about MAGA Libertarian regret. And this caused a big stir during the election cycle leading up to the November election within the Libertarian community. And I don't know how much of this you're aware of, but I'll kind of give you the story because I think it's kind of interesting. So, the Libertarian Party, which is a party I used to belong to, but I don't belong to it now because it's a train wreck. They're completely disorganized and the party is self-imploding. Philosophically, I'm pretty close to how they believe, not completely, but close. I'm in the right ballpark. So I've always followed the Libertarian Party going back decades. Like I said, I used to be a member of it. I haven't been a member for over 10 years. Well, within the Libertarian Party, which, by the way, they're the largest of all the third parties. They're bigger than the Green Party and the Peace and Freedom Party and all these other, smaller parties. But there's still really zero impact on what's happening in elections. I mean, come on. I mean, we know the Electoral College and the whole system is rigged for Republicans and Democrats, and it's near impossible for a third party or an independent candidate to kind of break through. I mean, the last one that had any kind of a chance at that was Ross Perot, and that was, wow, like 30 years ago. But there's a guy named Dave Smith who is a very vocal guy in the Libertarian, I guess, online community. He's actually he's a comedian by, quote, day. His day job is a comedian, but he's always on podcasts, and he's very knowledgeable and articulate on a lot of issues. There's a lot of people think he's right or wrong. I mean, we can debate some of that, but he's a well-known guy online in the Libertarian online space. He and this whole group of people within the Libertarian Party formed what they call the Mises Caucus, which is supposedly built off the ideas of Ludwig von Mises, who's an economist. And they are trying to embrace Mises's ideas. I think this organization is run out of Auburn University. And they tried to run a coup to take over the Libertarian Party. And to a great degree, they were successful. because the previous leadership of the Libertarian Party was not real professional, didn't have a lot of resources. So it wasn't that hard to kind of take over the leadership positions of this third party. Well, Dave Smith and the Mises Caucus in the Libertarian Party took a very different angle on a lot of issues. I mean, they were pro-Trump, they were pro-tariffs in some cases. They were definitely anti-illegal immigration. You found that this group in some ways had like racist undertones, and it caused a lot of friction within the libertarian movement. And as a result, the Libertarian Party is now in shambles. They're trying to rebuild it. But what was interesting is that Dave Smith, I'd say early in 2024, came out in support of Trump. And there were a lot of other members of the Libertarian Party, including the chairman of the board of the Libertarian Party, Angela McArdle, who came out supporting Trump. This group tried to get the Libertarian Party to endorse Trump. Trump came to the Libertarian convention, was booed, got some cheers. But, the Libertarian Party, there's a lot of scatterbrained folks out there that don't really necessarily believe in libertarianism as much as they believe in nihilism. They just want to see everything blown up. And Trump is a guy that can do that. But anyways, Dave Smith came out supporting Trump. And now Dave Smith says he regrets it and he apologizes and he was wrong, mainly because Trump is getting us involved in this Israel-Iran conflict. And that was a big thing for this group, this Mises Caucus, was that no new wars. We need to end the wars. It didn't matter who the good guy and the bad guy was. It didn't matter, what the settlement of terms was going to be. It just meant just stop fighting, stop killing, which I get that. But, obviously it's a lot more complicated than that. And Trump, because he's a con man, said, oh, yeah, I won't start any new wars. In fact, I'm going to end the Ukraine-Russia war on day one. And in short order, I'm going to negotiate a deal here between Israel and Gaza. We're going to knock that war down. There ain't going to be any new wars. And now look where we are. Right now, Israel is attacking Iran, blowing up a lot of their facilities, inflicting massive damage. Iran is returning the favor, but not nearly as successful in bombing facilities in Israel. But now Trump is clearly backing the attack on Iran. And a lot of people think we're on the cusp here of sending American troops in. And that's what Dave Smith was saying. He said, Trump lied to me. He said he wasn't going to get us involved in more wars. And look where we are now. Now we have 3 wars staring us in the face. I remember when this was all going down in 2024 before the vote, I was telling these people, I get the idea. They thought that the strategy is that if the libertarians keep fighting exclusively for libertarian ideas, which are largely not supported by the majority, that they're just going to be an exercise in futility as a lesser party and never really make any traction. Some people believe that the Libertarian Party, and I think this makes sense, needed to switch gears, change strategy so that the Libertarian Party wouldn't run their own candidate at all. They would instead endorse the Republican or the Democrat that promised the most libertarian policies to be implemented in their administration, which I think makes a great deal of sense for a third party, because it's impossible to break through as a candidate, as a third-party candidate. So here they could at least have some sway with the 2 or 3% of the population, which these days can break a tie or break a close race. So they thought they had a little bit of action here, a little bit of juice. The problem is Trump is a con man. Trump is not trustworthy. You can't make a deal with Trump because he's going to blow up the deal later. And we've seen him do this in business all the time. He refuses to pay contractors that are building some of his resorts. We've seen all kinds of cases where Trump just screws people over and completely ignoring the terms of the deal. MAGA Libertarian regret is what it all is. We tried to warn him. So now keep an eye on the Libertarian Party. I'm hopeful that they're going to get their act together. I have no confidence that they are going to do anything. I've kind of gotten to the point here where a lot of the ideas that I talk about in my podcast, our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the notion that we're all created equal, which means we have equal rights. And, a lot of these ideas are really important, talking about free markets and free enterprise and the benefits of capitalism to build wealth and bring people out of poverty. There's a lot of really important messages that the Libertarian Party kind of sort of represents, but never really articulates it right, and certainly has no fundamental philosophical basis to it. So that's why I'm doing part of my podcast, to talk about a lot of these things, because I think it's important that we understand there are different ways to think than the ways that we're being presented with in the media. It's not just red or blue. It's not just Democrat or Republican or maybe some MAGA, but there are third, fourth, fifth, sixth different kinds of opinions, ideas, different perspectives. And that's what I want to bring to the table. In fact, in my opinion, a lot of the ideals that I speak about in my podcast, which in many cases are libertarian or libertarian-ish, are really the founding ideas that built the United States of America. And it's right there in the Declaration of Independence. And many of those rights are guaranteed in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. So hopefully the libertarians kind of figure things out. I'd love to see them have some success, but I'm not planning on it. All right, let's keep going here. World War III. Okay, this has just been breaking over the last couple of days. We're seeing missiles being fired into Tehran that are blowing up buildings, apparently blowing up nuclear research facilities. Does Iran have a weapon of mass destruction? Do they have nuclear bombs? This kind of sounds like George W. Bush in Iraq from 20 years ago. It's like deja vu. Some people saying that they really don't even have nuclear weapons. But here's Israel going all in, going after a country that wants Israel essentially wiped off the map. But Israel ain't no saint. Israel is no angel. They have a lot of problems. They have a lot of immorality in the way they've conducted business in Gaza and in other times throughout history. But here we are, Iran and Israel battling it out. And I keep thinking to myself, Trump has already essentially screwed over Elon Musk. Elon Musk supported him because they were going to cut spending, and then none of that happened. Now Trump's big, beautiful bill is going to raise spending, raise the debt, which Musk was trying to fight against. Musk is out. Then Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democrat who really opposes regime change wars, now hears the rhetoric of Trump saying, well, we know where the Ayatollah is, and he's safe for now. But we'll see what happens in the future. Essentially making threats to assassinate their leader, to get U.S. airplanes and troops potentially coming into this. So I'm sure Tulsi Gabbard is there. She's the Secretary of National Intelligence or Director of National Intelligence. She's probably wondering, well, why in the hell did I believe this guy, Trump? We agreed there. We wouldn't pursue regime change wars, and here we are right on the cusp of about to do that. I now wonder, we've got three wars cooking. We've got Russia and Ukraine. We've got Israel and Gaza. And now we have Israel and Iran. And China and Taiwan could happen at any time. But these are all independent. It's not really a World War III. They're kind of separate things. But I keep wondering if some irrational actor is going to do something crazy. Is China going to suddenly jump in, or Russia jump in and defend Iran? Are each of these wars going to combine with like an allies and an axis of evil, that are going to be fighting these things? I mean, really, it wouldn't take much for a couple of stupid things to happen. I mean, that's how World War I happened with, that we had the Archduke Ferdinand that was assassinated. It could be, some maybe smaller player, smaller actor on the world stage could do something dumb and really ignite a World War III. And I think that's very possible. But in my opinion, right now, and this applies to all three of the wars, Iran, Israel, Gaza, and Russia, Ukraine. American troops should not go in. American airplanes should not be bombing these. These are not our wars. However, we, as the so-called leader of the free world, we should be using the bully pulpit, and our president especially should be the one articulating the values of America, articulating our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And essentially a separation of church and state, talking about the values that make America great, and then applying those standards to these other countries around the world that are fighting. Because to a great degree, well, we know that the Israel-Gaza fight is ultimately religion. We know the Israel-Iran fight is ultimately religion. The Russia-Ukraine fight is ethnicity, it's religion, it's settling old scores. It's a lot of things, but religion is part of it. We should be articulating it from a position of strength, of power, and of individual rights, and urging these other nations to move in that direction. Unless American interests are directly a threat, which I don't see that in any of these wars, maybe with the exception of the China-Taiwan potential war, I don't see a role for America to be involved in this. But it's interesting that I think we have the wrong guy in the White House, because Trump is the kind of guy that's always trying to prove to people that he's better and smarter than the next guy, that he can work the art of the deal, that he has superpowers to, solve problems. I alone can fix it. And that's dangerous when we have these very complex, very long historical battles that are really flaring up right now. It's the wrong guy to have there. And all this bravado about threatening to, assassinate the Ayatollah in Iran, I mean, not doing any favors there. So now Trump's demanding unconditional surrender of Iran, not just a ceasefire, but he wants Iran to bend the knee. This kind of language is what can only inflame the war rather than pacifying it. And that's Trump's MO. That's what he does. He's throwing gas on the fire, and he does it in almost every conflict. He did it with the LA ICE protests. He's doing it with all kinds of, he did it with the assassination attempt of the Minnesota politicians. So there are so many missed opportunities here where our executive, our chief executive is acting like a child on the world stage, trying to manipulate and play this game using a lot of lies and alternative facts, and really not standing up for good versus evil. It's very frustrating. Okay, where were you this past weekend? Or was it 2 weekends ago? No, I think it was this past weekend. Yeah, the No Kings rally. There's a picture right there of the No Kings rally in Rancho Bernardo. And I saw that San Diego represented. I mean, they had a big crowd down there by the harbor in downtown San Diego. I saw the overhead shots. There were a ton of people. Apparently, everyone was well behaved, and that was terrific. And I know that there were smaller, community-run protests for No Kings Day, and Rancho Bernardo was one of those. And I was thinking, oh, good for them. Good for these people. In fact, there's one of our good followers, listeners of this podcast, Bernie, was contacting me, seeing if I should go. And, I was considering going. I really was. And I just kind of, I don't know, I just was sort of reconsidered it. But I'll tell you what, what I failed to do is I should have brought my podcast there. I should have set up a card table with 2 microphones and 2 cameras and just interviewed people. Now, that would have been a really productive use of time, because not only would we be out there feeling the energy of the event, but we'd be able to amplify a lot of the messaging that was being discussed there, and share it in the podcast and give it a life of its own that can continue on into the future. And, a lot of the folks that are out there are hardcore Democrats or Bernie bros. And while we may agree that we oppose Trump, but we typically oppose Trump for different reasons. And a lot of the things that they want to accomplish, I don't necessarily agree with them. So it'd be kind of an interesting debate on some of the issues. But more or less, I should have gone there to hear people out. I mean, next time, that's what I'm going to do. And I did that, by the way, with the Trump protesters here in Poway. And that was really good content for the podcast. I enjoyed that. Okay, so a farewell to Kings. You know, I'm a big Rush fan. Farewell to Kings was a Rush album from the 1970s, but it applies here. I mean, did the No Kings protest get rid of the king? Well, obviously not. Makes you wonder how effective the protests are. I don't think they really move the needle. I don't think it's really changing Trump's behavior. I think unless there's some impeachment that's going to happen, I mean, we're going to have to ride this out until 2028. Because right now, with his support, his MAGA base that's not leaving him, they're going to stick with him. And as long as they remain loyal, he is going to have the power base in D.C. Republican congressmen are going to be afraid to go against them for fear of being primaried out. And this circus is going to continue. So let's hope that the tide starts shifting. But with No Kings, it was good. It was one of the biggest protests of all time, 5 million people on the street. But I'm not sure if it really moves the needle. Hey, here's something that's cool. Juneteenth, man. Now, I always get confused on what day this is. I think it's going to be on the 20th of June. I think it's usually on the Friday, and the day will vary depending on how the calendar breaks. But Juneteenth is the day when the slaves in the southern part of Texas, the last slaves, were finally told that they were free, that Lincoln had brought forth the Emancipation Proclamation. And it took a while for that message. I think Lincoln gave that message in 62, but it took a while for that message to, matriculate, to use an old NFL coach's terminology, to matriculate and work its way down into southern Texas. And this is what Juneteenth commemorates. And I didn't know anything about Juneteenth growing up as a kid. It was never taught in school. I went to Catholic school, 1st through 8th grade, went to a public high school. I don't recall this ever being mentioned. It wasn't until I was in my 30s and a guy I worked with, a young black man from Oceanside, was going to a Juneteenth celebration. And I was like, what in the heck is that? And he told me the story. And I was immediately just floored by it all because I had never heard the story. I think this is the greatest holiday. I mean, to me, this is like American Independence Day #2. But still, so many people kind of get teed off by this because they see it as, oh, it's a black thing. Oh, it's a woke thing. But I think this is important. I think this is people need to take a different perspective here. This is all about freedom and what makes America great. And that message of individual liberty finally reaching all the slaves, that's a time to celebrate freedom. Wish some of our right-wing friends would jump on board Juneteenth. It just seems like such a natural. Okay, a couple more topics I want to do before we go into the San Diego Community Forum. Did you see this memo that was put out by Amazon's CEO? His name's Andy Jassy. Bezos is out there as chairman or primary owner, but Andy Jassy is the CEO, and he's the one that's running the company now. And he put out essentially a short essay that he passed out to all the employees at Amazon, and it was really amazing. I read that, and I started, saying to myself, okay, here we go. Artificial intelligence. Things are moving fast, friends. Amazon has, I believe it was approximately 1,000 different AI initiatives within the organization to help improve the productivity of their workers, to help their customers have a better online shopping experience. They were finding all kinds of creative ways to radically innovate and improve their product and services. But what he also warned in this is that he expects there's going to be layoffs at Amazon because of AI. And this is kind of what we all kind of knew, right? We knew that AI short-term was going to eliminate some jobs. But in my opinion, long-term, we're going to create more jobs than we eliminate. But most people don't believe that. Most people see we're going to have less and less jobs. Robots are going to be doing everything. And that's why we need universal basic income. But robots aren't going to be doing everything. People will start doing different things and be doing innovative things, creating industries that never existed before. I mean, it's like right now, farming used to be, over half of the nation was a farmer. And now Less than 1% of the nation works in agriculture, and yet we produce more food than ever because of automation. But as a result, that's freed up a lot of human capital, a lot of financial capital to invest in new industries. And now we have the internet and we have electric cars and we have all these new industries and new technologies. That's going to continue. But it was interesting how he talked about how they're working on what they call our agents. And agents are something that you can speak to in a natural language, like talking to the Alexis personal assistant, that will do tasks for you using a range of AI tools to say, write a business plan, or put together a presentation, or write computer code, or run certain kinds of errands. This is cool. And you can see how the building blocks of this are being created now. And all of this really hit me because I'm 60 years old. And I've dabbled with some of the artificial intelligence tools, and they're pretty cool. You know, it still feels like I'm at the infancy of all of this, but I think I'm going to need to really double down and focus more on this because I'm 60. You know, one could say, hey, I've got 5 years left until I retire. And then who cares, right? I mean, I just have to deal with it. It's not like I'm going to be in the industry. And there's a lot of people my age that probably think that way. But I want to keep doing this podcast. I want to do things within John Riley Project, within the scope, well beyond my age 65. So I'm now thinking I need to refocus on this because I know there are tools, and I've used some of the AI tools to do video editing for me. And those have been good, but not great, but they've been helpful. But I'm thinking, man, I've got to do more. I've got to push myself to be on the bleeding edge of the innovation around AI as it applies to my personal and business life. What are you doing right now about AI? I'm curious. Let me know in the live chat. Let me know in the comment section. Okay, we got to talk about our good friend Ed Franklin. Ed Franklin. I was on his podcast last week, and he finally released the recording yesterday. And I like Ed Franklin. Now, Ed has his No Limits podcast. Ed is like this giant ball of positive energy, and he's big and he's strong and he works out. So he's just big and tough. And boy, he loves selling and he loves being out there helping people achieve their goals. And I joked that he was like the Zig Ziglar of poway. And he said, "Oh, I'm not really quite that." But, you know, he's a sales coach. He's a sales leader. And he's a personal motivator, and he's doing public speaking. He's got his own podcast. Great guy. And so we sometimes collaborate and talk about ways we can help each other, like things we're learning in our podcast, and we share tips. We go out to breakfast, he and I, and another guy named Tim that joins us, and we just have some really good discussions. And so Ed had me as a guest on his podcast, and it was cool. I mean, I rewatched it. Ed does 80% of the talking, but I just liked the way it all came off. And I was proud of what I did. I enjoyed what Ed did. It was all good. And in many ways, it's interesting because Ed and I talk about a lot of the same ideas, talk about being better, self-improvement, going out there and getting it, you know, going out there in life and making things happen. I come at it from a philosophical perspective of my life is my life to live. I only get one shot at this. Okay. You only live once. Go out there, be all that you can be. Make this life the most impactful, most important project that you have. Take your life seriously and go out there and use your mind, be rational, look for ways that you can benefit, where you can build win-win relationships with others and find ways to innovate and make positive impact on people's lives. And that's really, you know, if you talk about leaving a legacy, that would be something I would be thrilled if I had even the smallest impact with that. But Ed's doing a lot of the same thing as well. But it's interesting that, you know, he's kind of approaching it more from the self-improvement angle and from the sales motivational angle and the sales discipline angle to go out there and how you can go out and achieve your dreams. So we had a really interesting talk, and I think it was terrific. It really was. It's also giving me greater confidence because for one, after I listened to that, I thought to myself that, here I am, I'm doing my little podcast here in Poway. And for most of the podcasts, I comment a lot on local Poway issues. I just got to think bigger. We need to make this a bigger focus. And came back to me and said the same thing. Said we both need to be thinking bigger, because we think we both have a pretty powerful message to share. But it gives me confidence, because right now, the whole angle of pursuing happiness and the philosophical ideas built into the founding values of America are the things that get me excited. And I like to apply those principles, those ideas in the world of culture, the world of politics, the world of current events, and to show flaws in the way some people think and show alternative ways to think about things that really would improve how we go about our daily lives. And that's a lot of what I talk about. But rather than being just another guy talking, ranting about politics in a podcast, I felt like there needed to be a much higher purpose to this. And that's why this podcast is focused on our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The more I think it through, the more I'm realizing that this message is important. This message resonates. This message can be influential. It's just a matter of getting it out there. And so I'm going to continue to keep doing this. I'm using current events, what's the latest thing going on with Trump, as a way to get my message out, but mostly because that makes it relevant and interesting for a lot of the people to follow the podcast and have some new information and new news and new ideas to share. But I'm feeling good about this. And I've got more ideas on the pursuit of happiness and like clothing brands and, public speaking ideas. In fact, Ed and I kind of have similar objectives, but it's just giving me more confidence. So I just want to say thanks to Ed for inviting me on his show. And he said he was feeling a lot more energy and a lot more positive motivation from our talk. So was I. And so all good. So thanks, Ed. Okay. Let's now go to our San Diego Community Forum. And my apologies, we can hear Sniffer in the background. It's now 4:12 p.m. and in our house, we feed him at 5. Sniffer is our beagle, and we adopted him around Christmas time. He's a senior dog that was, if he wasn't adopted, he probably was going to be, put out to pasture. We adopted him, and he's been a son of a bitch. He's a difficult dog as he's been abused. He's like a foster child, and we're bringing him around. But usually he always eats at 5, and starting at about 3:15, 3:30, he starts getting chirpy for his dinner. And we're now at 4:13. And so you might hear him barking a little bit in the background. But let's go back to our San Diego Community Forum. And, when I get my podcast going on a live stream, we're going to open this up to live chat. But right now, let's just get some social media people involved. And we'll start here with Melinda talking about the Escondido immigration rally. And this was something that I commented on, I think, earlier this year, where I was visiting my mom who lives in Escondido. I was driving home, and right at the intersection of Lincoln and the 78 freeway, and I think, is that Broadway? I think it is Broadway, right where the Toyota dealership was. There was a big big pro-immigration rally, pro-immigrants, both legal and illegal. And it wasn't so much anti-ICE. This was before Trump got really aggressive. And I was just commenting on what I observed, in which, by the way, I saw a lot of positive energy. I saw families and children, and I saw American flags waving, which I thought was great. I saw some Mexican flags waving, which I thought was detracting from their message. Because I think these are people that want to be in America. They should be embracing American values and the American flag. And by the way, embracing our rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and essentially undercutting the whole MAGA movement and the notion of what America really represents. But here, Melinda, she had a different opinion. And she says, that's gang territory. Consuelo Martinez's district. I guess she's one of the city council members in Escondido. She's the champion of illegal immigrants. Stole her spot from Ed Gallo. You love what they're doing because you don't live there. Well, I live close. I live in Poway. We border Escondido, and I'm up there quite a bit. Again, these were well-behaved protesters. They were on the sidewalk. When they crossed the street, they had the crosswalk going. And they were just kind of following the rules. They weren't obstructing other people from moving around, getting around. They were just expressing themselves. And I thought did it with a lot of positive energy. But I know that Escondido is definitely probably a lot more MAGA than even Poway. So there are going to be definitely people like Melinda that don't like those illegal immigrant rallies there in Escondido. Let's keep going. This is a good comment. This is about here in my hometown of Poway. We have recalls going on right now for 2 councilmen and I think for our mayor. But one of those recalls, the most serious of all of them, is this recall of Tony Blaine, who is allegedly violated ethics standards, in many cases may have violated the law. He's under investigation by the district attorney, and there's a large recall campaign against him. I'm not going to go all into the detail. We can get into that. If you go look up some of my other podcasts about Tony Blaine and Poway, you can get all the detail. But it was interesting here because I had seen a campaign sign on Espola Road where it was Tony Blaine for Poway Mayor 2026. And I thought, man, that is ballsy. And I kind of broke down the sign, and I thought it was funny how Tony Blaine was on offense rather than being on defense. Rather than trying to prevent the recall, he's out there campaigning to be mayor in the next election that's not going to take place for another year and like 8 months. It was crazy. But here, Anita Anders responded, and she says, hey, those signs that he has on Espola are not okay with the owner. Those owners actually signed the recall petition, LOL. And it's funny, you see those signs, they're in that kind of right of way in between the road and the backyard fence of some of those homes. So is that the homeowner's property? Is that kind of the city? They call it right of way. It's sort of a buffer zone. Is that where that is? I don't know, but it's interesting. I'll tell you what, when I drive around Poway, I see a lot more recall Tony Blaine signs than Tony Blaine signs for mayor, and it's really not even close. Okay, let's keep going here. And this is from John Converse. Oh, and I was talking about the Trump tariffs. Trump always chickens out, right? He set the tariff and then he backs off on the tariff, and it just con man actions A, B, and C. And I was talking about how Canada's not ripping us off. China's not ripping us off. It's just trade, man. We give them money, they give us goods. And then they give us money and we give them goods. And then there's a trade surplus or a trade balance, but that's just like that's just like something on a spreadsheet. It's just an addition of all the amounts of trades. But every trade is, for the most part, win-win. So there's no subsidies going on here. People are just buying stuff, and some people buy more than others. But here, John Converse says, it is a subsidy. When the amount being spent on one side far exceeds the value or monetary gain from the other, that is in fact a subsidy. It is insane how many people in America don't understand basic economics. This is like Econ 101. Because if America is buying steel from Canada and we're importing it in, we're giving money to Canada, we're getting steel in return. Well, we're buying that because we think the steel is worth that amount of money. They negotiate probably a deal, and where both sides say yes, the buyer and the seller of the steel both say yes. And when they do, the value is even. Well, maybe not even. It might be the buyer probably values the steel more than the amount of money he's spending. That's why he's trading for the steel. And the steel manufacturer might be valuing the money rather than the steel itself, because they're going to get more money than what the steel costs them to make. So both sides win, both sides profit. But it's not a subsidy. When you go to your grocery store and you buy stuff from your grocery store, that's not a subsidy, it's trade. Why do people get this confused? You know why? It's because Trump is out there on the bully pulpit lying about this over and over again. He's the one that says China is ripping us off, Canada is ripping us off. He's the one that's saying it's a subsidy. We're subsidizing these other countries because of the trade deficit. He is lying through his teeth. And yet it's largely unchallenged, except by some in the mainstream media, but it doesn't matter. MAGA will just believe it. They'll just believe whatever he says, and they're convinced that all these economists that know what about economics, they figure they're wrong. It's like people believing in the tooth fairy. It's insane. So again, here, John Converse, thanks for your response, but hey, man, read up a little bit on this and what trade really is all about. It's not a subsidy, it's trade. They swap cash for goods. They're both happy. Okay, here's the last comment in our community forum. And this is from our good friend, Mike Devine here in Poway, Mike Poway. And I was making a comment that, Trump, does he really care about illegal immigrants? I mean, really? Does he really care about this trade war with China? Or does he really see these as more like political opportunities to exploit a situation, to get leverage, to create scapegoats, to say, I'm good, they're evil, to try to create this divisiveness, this friction that he could parlay into greater political power? That, to me, that's what it's all about with him. Once I accepted Trump as a con man, everything kind of made sense. But Mike said to me, Mike challenged me, and he says, my saying he doesn't care assigns feeling to Trump without evidence. And whether he cares about, say, the Dodgers or something, it's not a criticism anyways. We all care about different things and we accept each other regardless. Yeah, we do. We all do care about different things. There, in the world, in our life, we all pursue our happiness in very different ways. We go out and live our life according to our values. Different things make different people care more or gain greater happiness. So yeah, we're going to care about things in different ways. But my point is that Trump only cares about these issues as a means to leverage his power base. So ultimately, he and his children can be executing all these business deals. That's my theory. And because that's his true aim, because he has no political philosophy. He has no principles, no standards. He'll say America first, but he'll do things that undermine American first. A lot of his policies are in conflict. A lot of them are contradictions. A lot of them make no sense. But it works based on how he's able to manipulate his base, and that's why he's in power. He's a con man. He's presenting shiny objects when he's talking about, deport them all or unconditional surrender to Iran. He's bloviating, creating all these shiny objects, these smoke and mirrors. And meanwhile, over here, his family has $2.9 billion in crypto wealth. Eric Trump's going around the world setting up these billion-dollar real estate deals in Vietnam and China and other parts of Europe. We've got the Trump meme coin. We've got the Trump phones, which I talked about in this podcast. We've got Trump Bibles that are being sold in his base being exploited. It's nuts. So really, what does Trump care about? He cares about himself. That's one of his big problems of him being a president. We need a president that cares about America and cares about American values and wants to project, like Ronald Reagan talked about, the shining city on the hill, which I thought was a wonderful metaphor that Reagan talked about. And you may agree or disagree on what that shining city on the hill should be made of and what those values are. But I do like the idea that America is projecting to the outside world what our values are, what makes us great, and why so many people want to come to America to be Americans. And in my opinion, it comes back down to our inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Hey, man, we're doing this in under an hour, 58 minutes and 24 seconds. Thank you, everybody, for joining me on this episode number 343 of the John Riley Project. So for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, this is John Riley.